Good evening. It is Monday, February the 22nd, about 9:30 p.m. My name is Shay Gibson. This is the Chucktown Wind Report brought to you by Wind Alert. So let's go ahead and talk about winds and weather for the next 2 days. I'm going to spend the first 2 to 2.5 minutes just doing the wind report only for those of you that just want to see what the winds are going to be doing for the next 2 days. Then I'll get into a little bit more detail about the severe weather and how that's all going to be wrapped into it. So taking a look at the surface map, right now we have this frontal boundary that's sort of rippling in a wave-like fashion. We call this an undulating front. Ahead on top of that front, we have an east-northeast flow from high pressure to the north, wedging down. And then from the south, we start to see a southerly flow develop, and this will be the case for pretty much tomorrow, where we see weak southerly flow with some passing isolated rains and possible storms with some of that onshore flow. Very contaminated areas, so no sea breeze circulation is really anticipated for tomorrow. It's going to be on the weak side all day tomorrow, and then even into Wednesday, where things really ramp up. We're going to see an area of low pressure here swing down through Texas and then really carve up the Appalachian Mountain area. So winds are going to really ramp up on Wednesday. So let's go ahead and take a look at data scope for Charleston. Here you can see that east-northeasterly flow making it all the way down into Charleston, and then down here to the south you see that southerly flow making it in all the way just to Seabrook. So we're kind of right there in the middle right now. It's probably right where a warm frontal boundary is starting to develop over our area, and we should push some thunderstorms and rain showers inland later tonight, and even in through tomorrow we'll see that onshore flow just kind of carving up through the area. So let's take a look at the details for the Charleston area as far as Datascope is concerned, and let's go with the model suite for tonight going through tomorrow. There's lots of there is a little bit of disagreement in some of these directions because some of the models hold that northeasterly flow through the night, and then that's just the temperance of a rippling frontal boundary. The undulating front is that you never really know until you look at the sensors and see what the readings are. That easterly flow definitely shows that the boundary is to the south or right over us, and then the southerly flow means that it's passed back to the north. So there's going to be some disagreement until tomorrow afternoon when all those winds pretty much become convergent and they start up from the south, and that will be the norm afternoon tomorrow. We should see all winds go south and then hold there all the way through Wednesday. Now as we go into Wednesday, we can see the models are really cranking up the winds. We see south to south-southwesterly directions. Could become more southwesterly as time goes on, but all the models are in agreement for a build into the 20s. So we have to be really careful with that, because some of these gusts are going to be taking up into the 30s and mid-30s, and even down here in the GFS you can see these gusts take it all the way up to 41 knots. So we have to remember that with the air temperatures rising, we could still see marine layering effects along the beaches over the cooler shelf waters, keep the stabilization and keep the winds down. So I'm only going to call for 16 to 20 knots on Wednesday for the beaches, and then as we go inside the harbor mouth and inland, we could easily see these numbers that you're seeing down here on the GFS. So we're talking 22 to 26 knots with higher gusting going on. Even if we look at the NAM 12K model, we can see that's also holding as well. So as we go to the medium resolution and even into the higher resolution models, we're seeing some agreement on build for Wednesday afternoon, and that's going to be pretty much what I think is going to happen is the beaches will see less wind, just inside the harbor mouth and inland we'll see more wind. So that's going to be the Chucktown wind report for the winds for the next 2 days. So let's go ahead and take a look. The next part of this video is for severe weather and a little bit more detail to the overall forecast. So let's go ahead and take a look at the GRU on radar. Here's what the model run for the next couple of days is going to be. Here's tomorrow, here's tonight, where you see that warm front working some of those thunderstorms inland. And as we go into tomorrow, we see another warm front lifting up along the coastline. You can barely see the line right here. And as we go into time, we see those rains and showers start to increase along the coastline. And then we get a little bit of a break, and then you start to see the low really start to come together out west. So if we put this into time and motion, this is the North American model 4 kilometer, which is high resolution, and it's only going to go out to about 36 hours. But you can see that low really start to swing where it makes a connection to the Gulf and pick up moisture and momentum right there as it goes across the northern Gulf states. And this is where the severe weather is really going to start ramping up. We'll have probably at least 2, if not 3 waves of lines of thunderstorms work their way through here on Wednesday. And that's not before all of this warm front activity is going to be going on along the coastline. So we could see some possible some tornadic activity associated with this. We just saw what was called the mesoscale convective vortex make its way and slam into North Carolina the other day, which caused a tornado signature just offshore following the Gulf Stream, and it made its way onshore up by Fort Macon, North Carolina. So that was pretty significant with lots of activity out there on the Gulf Stream, and the waters are warmer around 78 degrees. So we have to keep all of this in mind for the next 2 days as we see the severe weather really come together. And there we go again. You can see that low really coming together out west and spinning up, and that's going to continue to go right up the Appalachian Mountains. So let's go ahead and take a look at the radar. And you can see where most of the showers, the screen's trying to load here, so I apologize for the blotchiness. But you can definitely see where most of the thunderstorms and rain right now that are going on are right along that boundary, upstate South Carolina, even to the northern parts near Florence, and then up into southeast North Carolina. Now, if we take a look at the water vapor imagery, you can get a better idea of this low coming together out here. A little bit of a dry pocket ahead of it, but once it makes this connection down here to the Gulf, it's going to swoop. It's going to reconnect with this boundary and really swoop up the jet stream that is dipping down through the country right now. So that's it for the GRE. Let's see. I want to take a look at the storm prediction. And this is storm prediction for tomorrow. This is day 2 convective outlook for tomorrow. We see that the Gulf states have the highest potential for very severe weather and tornadic activity, and they're in the moderate. They even list some of the cities down here where the highest risk is. Now, as time goes on, as we get into day 3 outlook, this is talking about Wednesday, we see that our area becomes what's called slight. Now, if you want to get an idea what slight is, February the 3rd, we had a tornado touchdown near Savannah, Georgia, under a slight severe risk potential from the WPC. So this could also be elevated by the time Wednesday rolls around. And here's the probabilistic model for this. And as we go into day 1, if they have slight, it's a lower amount because they're already ready to upgrade, or not upgrade, but to increase or elevate the risk scenario for this to highs or moderates. And so here we are, we're at 15% slight with the significant severe weather looming in the distance. So they pretty much slated the whole Carolina eastern coast as far as the day 3. We still stay at 15%, and that includes tornadic activity, wind, and hail. So we have to be very careful about that. So if you're planning anything, make sure that you're weather aware and keep an eye on radar. Here's our low-level jetting at 3,000 feet for tomorrow. By the time we wake up in the morning, we're watching the low-level jets to see what kind of mixing we're going to have at the surface. Now, for tomorrow, it looks pretty weak. We're only got about 20 knot jets, about 3,000 feet. So that means we're going to have really weak winds at the surface, especially over those cooler shelf waters and beaches. And as we go into time, here comes Wednesday. And by the time we get into Wednesday morning, we see those low-level jets really increase as the vorticity maximum starts to happen around this mid-level low. The mid-level low is going to be somewhere around 500 millibars, and so here's our low-level jetting going on. We got about 50 knots over our coastline right here. That little flagstaff with the solid black little triangle, that represents 50 knots. So that means at 3,000 feet it's that, and it could gust even kind of close to that down near the surface. So that's what we're going to be really watching Wednesday afternoon as that low passes to our west and then heads up to the north-northwest. Once that happens, things sort of start to ramp down a little bit, but then we also get high pressure working in from the west. And if we go back to our surface map, down here is a high pressure that's going to be moving in behind this entire thing. So once we get high pressure set up in the Gulf of Mexico, the northern Gulf of Mexico, the gradient behind that's going to be increasing. We're going to see a westerly flow really ramp up here in the Charleston area for Thursday morning, and then all day Thursday. It shouldn't start to fade until maybe late afternoon and into the evening. So we got 2 days of high winds, one from the southerly directions with severe weather associated, and then another one for Thursday. And that also means if we're going to be looking at our tidal surging, now we're under full moon, and our tidal surge really only takes it just over 6 feet for tomorrow morning. And then our high tide anomalies, where you see this blue line, is where the high tide is expected to be. The black X's are where the tide is expected to surge higher to. So it doesn't look like we're in any real bad shape for coastal flooding from high tides. We could be from local flooding from rains, though, so we have to keep that in mind as far as flooding goes for the coastline. But what's really interesting is here, if you look at these, it's showing that the high tide potential is going to be much lower than what the high tide is expected, and that's going to be banking on those strong westerly winds pushing the water out of the harbors and rivers. So that means it'll keep the tide lower than normal. So that's also something to think about. We have just a little bit of a surge ahead of that front that's coming, or ahead of the cold fronts, the 2 or 3 cold fronts we may see come across underneath that low pressure, and then behind that, with the high pressure with the strong westerly winds, we could see lower than normal high tide. So very interesting kind of point there. Here's our numerical model chart with the NAM 4K. I'll go ahead and give this a quick whirl, and you can see right here, this is Tuesday morning at 7 a.m., and I'm just going to go ahead and time. Here we are by Wednesday morning at 7 a.m., and here comes let me back up just a second. All this is warm front activity ahead of it. So any passing isolated thunderstorm and activity is all basically just from onshore or convergence for this low pressure system. So here comes our first wave of thunderstorm lines right here by Wednesday morning into midday, and then once those pass, here comes wave number 2 behind that. So we could be looking at a second line of thunderstorms, and then possibly some residual showers and maybe some thunderstorms after that passes through. But once that low lifts up far enough to the northeast, we'll get some of that cooler wind down behind that with this westerly flow traveling in. Here comes that high pressure here, and then that's going to be kicking in the westerly winds behind it. So that's kind of it in a nutshell as far as the entire Chucktown wind report. So just stay safe, and if anything unique comes up between now and tomorrow, I'll be back on to talk about it. And as always, I'll be doing some small visual updates with some text in the Chucktown wind report. So until then, take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching.